Cargar. Bien. Volvamos acá. No. Bueno, vamos a aprovechar de nuevo este. Y vamos a ir para abajo. Abajo. De nuevo, porque quiero cruzar esta vez por la puerta roja.
You know, you really aren't going anywhere, and I don't say that deceitfully. I truthfully mean that there isn't a story down here. The story was back up where I told you to go in the first place. Right now, you're just running around looking at empty halls. And frankly, that's perhaps even more infuriating for me. So why don't you throw me a bone, give me a chance, and just let me tell the story I want to tell, hmm?
Ok. Ahora voy a ir por la puerta roja. Solamente para ver qué hay.
Now listen carefully. This is important. Stanley walked through the red door.
No, joder. Por esta también. Está todo oscuro y vacío. Y tengo miedo. ¡Uy!
Good. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I'd like to show you. But to do that, I think it would be best for us to start from the beginning. This is a very sad story about the death of a man named Stanley.
¿Qué?
Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. His job pushing buttons demanded little of him, so there was not much of himself to give. And in this way, Stanley's job felt less and less like his every day. But if buttons need pushing one day, it means they'll need pushing the next, and then the next. So, without question or judgment, Stanley continued to do what the screen told him. One keystroke flowed into another keystroke, flowed into his ride home, flowed into dinner, flowed into waking up, flowed into going to work, and here he was again. Stanley was typing out a complete sentence that said absolutely nothing at all. If in reality no one ever actually disappeared from the office, and Stanley never got the opportunity to make a decision, to choose which path he wanted to take, would his life still have any meaning? Perhaps when we long for something deeply enough, these hopes and fantasies become so strong in our minds that we truly believe that we're there, controlling that person, and living that adventure. To manipulate your own thoughts and emotions might mean freedom from a self-imposed prison, but these delusions can be fatal to those who can't tell the difference. And so, Stanley asked, if that door never opened, if I'll never be able to walk away from those people and from these buttons, is this life still worth experiencing? Am I actually happy? Stanley answered this question by pushing a button. Then he pushed a button, and then he pushed a button. Then he pushed a button. Then he pushed a button.
No estoy apretando nada. ¡Ey, no apreté nada! Oh, no. Pero... ¡Qué final más raro! Está bien. No entiendo por qué el coso me tiene impresionado acá, pero... aprisionado acá. Va contra mi voluntad o alterando mi voluntad. Pero algo más raro es joder con el narrador. Eso lo hace bastante entretenido el mod. Muy bien, estamos yendo para arriba. ¿Ahora qué? No dijo nada. No dijo absolutamente nada. Muy bien. ¿Ahora qué? ¿Hola? Va, en serio. ¿Hola? Narrador. No lo había visto.
It almost perplexed Stanley that he had actually gone and stepped into this metal trap. After all, it should have been no surprise that this thing would lead him to his death.
No había visto.
But he thought to himself, this is simply the price to pay for ruining a perfectly good story.
No.
So he resigned and willingly accepted his fate. the
No,
inevitable
no,
end
no, 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 no,
toward
no.
which he had spent so
Fuera,
long
fuera,
stumbling.
fuera, fuera.
Farewell, Stanley.
No, no me hagas esto, no seas puto. No, no, no. Ugh.
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator as he sent his subject down the conveyor belt and into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, Stanley was obliterated as the machine crushed every bone in his body.
Ay, ya,
killing
la
him
puta que te
instantly.
parió. Zafé, no sé cómo, no, en serio, no entiendo cómo. Si ya acabo de decir que morí, no tengo idea de qué pasó. Bajemos.
It's a shame, then, that for all his work, it was such a meaningless victory for the narrator. Did he really think he would accomplish anything by murdering this disposable vessel?
Qué mierda. Oh, ¿qué? ¿Qué mierda? ¿Qué significa esto? Que...
Every possible choice Stanley could make had been designed for him long before he ever set foot here. The narrator
Dios, me
wanted to
tapé.
kill him. Stanley was already dead from the moment he hit
Ah,
start.
bueno. Qué pelotudo que soy, concha de madre. No. Ah, como sea. Vamos a hacerlo... Vamos a ir por el
Stanley decided
camino
to go to the
original.
staff lounge to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well
Y
by
vamos a cambiar un
himself
par de cosas.
and constantly
Si es que-
needed
si es
support
que
and
hay.
guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him.
Ya sé.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Ya sé. No voy a apretar nada en la sala del jefe.
As Stanley entered the lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there.
Muy bien, vamos. Uy, las escaleras. Me había olvidado esto.
Coming to a
No, cargar nada. Guardar. A ver si me lo guarda.
staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Negatorio. Hola, Lautaro.
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, of admitting that he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, was it really worth taking that risk? All because he believed everyone had disappeared? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am
Ay,
crazy. Everyone I know simply vanishing out of the blue, there's almost no other explanation for
Ah,
it.
ya.
And a nagging fear began to creep up in his mind. Questions that had been there all along. He just hadn't put his finger on them yet. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down? Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he
Eso me lo
went?
vengo preguntando desde el
And for
principio del
that
juego.
matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Was he just walking around in circles?
Sí.
Where am I, he thought. And the more he found himself unable to answer these questions, the more questions continued to arise, until he came to the issue that had been slowly boiling until he could ignore it no longer. Why is there a voice in my head, dictating everything that I'm doing and
Esa es buena
thinking?
pregunta.
Suddenly, every door slammed shut. No, Stanley screamed. I need to get out of here. I need to know that there's something out there. I need to know it's not just all in my
Ay, ¿qué
head.
tal?
And he screamed and clutched at his skull
Ay, Dios.
as the voice grew harsher and the music in the background rose higher and higher. And then, moments before collapsing to the ground, Stanley clenched his fists and screamed to anyone who might be listening, I'm not real! I'm not real! Don't believe any of it! None of it's
¿Qué?
real! And then everything went black.
¿Qué?
This is the story of a woman named Mary.
¿Qué?
Mariella woke up on a day like any other. She got dressed, went to work, clocked in, clocked out, and then she walked home. But her walk on this day was interrupted by the body of a man who had stumbled through town talking and screaming to himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Moments after seeing him, she would turn, run to the nearest police station, and call for an ambulance. But for just a few brief seconds, she merely stood there, unable to move.
¿Qué mierda?
The tragedy was not the death of a single person. It was that she would never know this man's story, never hear in his own words what had happened to him, or what he believed had happened to him. For to know these things would be to exist inside the head of the man himself. So all she could do was observe from a distance and pity him. But Mariella had places to be and people to meet with, very important people, whose impressions of her would affect her career and indeed the rest of her life. She stood there for only a moment, looking down at the body, and then she ran.
Llama a la ambulancia, no seas puta. ¡Qué historia! No, en serio, está muy bien hecho esto.